Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast. This is the Group of Five Deep Dive. I'm Mike Calabrese, joined as always by Mike Iannello. We're going to go through the Week 13 card in G5 land, get into our hero of the week from Week 12, into our best bets, the G5 High Five, and the Moneyline Underdog Parlay.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast.
All right, here we go.
Get to the G5 hero of the week from week 12. There was lots of good options there, so I'm excited to hear what Iannello has to bring to the table. Let's talk very briefly. I know this is the G5 focused podcast, but let's talk about the playoff just for a moment, because we talk about, during the spring in the NFL draft, it's proud graduation day for our G5 guys. We get to puff out our chest. Well, we have a team that's number 4 in the projected field right now in Boise State. They certainly earned it. It's been the gang that can't shoot straight out of the Big 12. They continue to slide backwards. As long as Boise keeps winning, they're at least going to have an opportunity to get that first round bye, which seemed like absolute fiction back in August. We assumed, and everybody assumed, that they would just be the number 12 team, penciled into that 5-12 matchup, having to go on the road, going the hard way to try to make a run in the college football playoff. But now if they move into the de facto Elite Eight, that's really interesting for a Boise team. And also get some extra time for Jeanty to get 100% healthy. I know he's been playing through some injuries. So lots of interesting angles there. But let's zoom out for a moment. As I said, expand our purview to the entire field. What are your thoughts around all of this bluster and arguing and conference supremacy? And let's bring on Danny Cannell so we can get beat up by Pate on his show. All of these people taking one side or the other. Is it Big Ten? Is it Indiana apologists? Is it SEC fans puffing out their chest? What are your thoughts on what's going on in this year, what is becoming the most contentious playoff field and argument leading up to the actual field that we've seen so far?
Yeah, which I'll be honest, I thought it'd be the opposite. I mean, I'm very excited for you and me have argued about this for 3 years. I'm very excited for the 12-team playoff. I think it'll solve all these arguments. So why we continue to have them is the dumbest thing ever. I know you've talked about it. Like, having this show is so stupid, and it just makes all the most powerful people have the Tuesday reveal show. All it does is make the quote unquote most powerful people in college football look so stupid and so brain dead. You have Joey Galloway talking about they should sit Curtis Rourke against Ohio State so he doesn't get hurt. You have Booger saying something about like Penn State didn't look convincing against UCLA. Like, they smoked UCLA. UCLA had 0.0 chance of winning that game from the moment the ball kicked off. So, like, that's something who, like, okay, but you didn't watch that game. You just, like, looked at the box score, and it, like, I don't think we covered. I think we won by, like, 17 instead of 28.
Yeah, UCLA scored right at the end and went for a 2-point conversion. Yeah, it was pure garbage time.
Same thing with the Illinois game. Is if I forget who it is. Some Twitter account tweets the success rate differentials, and Penn State over Illinois was the most in the entire country that week, even though the score was kind of close. And that was when like the SEC teams are still playing like schools of the blind, and we dominated UCLA, or Illinois. But if you just check the score, it wasn't that convincing. I am just getting so annoyed and so frustrated with the SEC teams that are all sitting there jumbled up crying about strength of schedule. Strength of schedule is the worst argument in sports because A, you set the goddamn schedule. This isn't like, the NFL where it's just based on your divisions and you get screwed out of the luck of the draw. You make the schedule. All these SEC teams crying about having to play each other 7 times. You guys voted to expand the conference. You wanted this. You wanted to try to kill the Big 12 by pulling in Texas. You started this whole thing that killed the Pac-12. You're trying to kill the ACC now by taking like Florida State and all of them. You wanted this. Don't cry about having to play Texas and Oklahoma when you wanted them in. Bud Elliott says this all the time, and it's the perfect saying. Take the check, take the losses. I don't want to hear you crying that you went through a gauntlet. Also, the SEC is not a gauntlet this year. Like, oh, we had to play Arkansas and Florida. Arkansas is terrible. I don't want to hear the gauntlet you have to play. Texas hasn't played anyone. Who's Texas's best win? Michigan? Colorado State? Vandy? Like, I don't want to hear anything about, Texas, people complain about Penn State and Indiana. Sure, yeah, I'm a Penn State fan. I'm not, I don't really have a problem with where Penn State's ranked, and, you can make an argument one way or the other. Penn State's schedule has been easy, but, so is Texas. Why is Texas ranked ahead of us? Why is Texas ranked ahead of Indiana? and this is how delusional SEC fans are. I'm convinced Indiana would be getting more respect, and SEC fans would have no problem with where they were ranked. If they played Alabama and lost by 50, they'd be like, well, they played Alabama, good for them. But because they just like I don't know how losing to good teams is somehow better than beating bad teams. Like that concept has never made sense to me. If Tennessee wanted to be ahead of Georgia, beat them. You're not. You didn't. You suck. Like, okay, Indiana hasn't played Georgia. Well, guess what? They're going in the playoff. I don't need to see Tennessee do it again. Tennessee proved they can't beat Georgia. Do I think Indiana can beat Georgia? No. I want to see it. I already saw Tennessee not do it. Now let's see Indiana try. Let's see BYU try. Let's see Colorado try. Let's see Boise try. I don't need to see these dog shit SEC teams that think they're good because they play in the same conference as teams that have won national championships in the past. Like, you had your chance, you lost. Get out of the paint. I'm so like, why Missouri's even ranked is a joke. It makes me so frustrated. And the whole point of the playoffs is to not argue about this because everyone controls their own destiny. The whole point of this was to avoid the Florida State situation, to take the human element, to take the committee being like, well, I think this team is better than that team. You don't have to do it. Because if you lose 3 times, you have no business being in this. And if you didn't, you'll have your shot. Tennessee had their shot. They had it against Georgia. They lost. I don't want to hear anything about it. Don't say, oh, we deserve to be in the playoffs because we beat Florida. I don't care. You stink. Get out. Now,
I think what the college football playoff needs, they'll release statements. Sometimes they'll have committee members go on these shows from time to time and basically read a statement, and they get softball questions. I want like an old school contentious White House briefing room press secretary situation and fill it up with all of the partisan media members who are carrying the water for the SEC, people who believe that Indiana should be ranked where they are. Have them all there and have them answer the questions. Because I think very quickly, if there was an opportunity for the committee to go on the offensive and say things that we all know that they're already doing, which is moving the goalposts. It seems like every single year there's a different value placed on the wins that you have, the strength of schedule, whether players get hurt or not are healthy. This came into play last year with Florida State. If there was a press secretary that stood up there and said, just an FYI, if Indiana loses by 38 points to Ohio State, that one loss is enough to kick them out of the playoff. I think everybody in the college football universe would go, all right, that seems fair. If they lose by 7, they absolutely should be in the field with 11 regular season wins. Let's just move on to the next thing. Like, the way that you play does matter, the actual games. But I agree with you, this idea that, oh, you lost to a quality team, so that loss doesn't count. It doesn't hold water for me because you do get the benefit on the other side, which is you get these mulligans. You can lose 2 games. No one's saying that Georgia shouldn't be in the field, but Georgia looked awful in some of their losses. Carson Beck looks absolutely lost. I think it's, Penn State takes, rightful amount of hate for their quarterback play and their questions against Ohio State. But what about Carson Beck in some of these big games? I just don't think that anything is even-handed at this point because there's no leadership in the room from the committee allowing this conversation to just go in circles over and over again every Tuesday.
And here's the nice thing I'll say about the SEC too, is like, okay, you guys play a gauntlet, like just call your regular season a playoff because it is. Like, you've already played the playoff games. I know your big complaint about the 12-team playoff has always been like, we're just going to get the same 4 teams anyway, so who cares? Fine. And I agree with you, for the most part, we will get the same 4 teams. So the way I view the first round is answering the what ifs. Well, how do we know Florida State's not as good? They didn't play those teams. How do we know if Indiana's good? They haven't played anyone. Like, we don't know if Indiana can beat these teams.
See, the SEC fans are already going a step further where they're saying Indiana absolutely should not get home field advantage because of their schedule. So you're already taking more away from these what-if teams.
But
and that's the issue that I have.
SEC fans said the same exact thing all last year about Michigan's cupcake schedule. And then Michigan beat Alabama and won the national title. I get the helmet's different, and Indiana's not known as a powerhouse. But how do we know Indiana can't beat Georgia? We know Tennessee. Tennessee already made the playoffs. They lost their first round playoff game against Georgia. Now, 4 weeks later, Indiana will get to play a playoff game against Georgia. Look at the SEC always claims they're king. So, like, we have the king of the SEC, and then the first round is basically to see what other teams match up against the SEC. And then if what these fans claim is true, the SEC teams will move on, and we won't have anything to deal with. But the teams that already played them don't deserve another shot at them. Like, Tennessee had their playoff game. Indiana hasn't. Let's give it to
The
them.
last thing I'll say, I think there's been a lot of chatter around Indiana saying, all right, if I'm an SEC school, just, schedule cupcakes. Once again, Georgia, if they get into a resume comparison with the committee, they have that Clemson win. That helps them not only to get into the field, but also potentially, instead of being 11th or 10th, moving up to 8th and getting to host a game in Athens. They earned that because they scheduled. And this is once again that vacuum of not having a press secretary, not having someone to say what they're probably thinking, but they don't want to come out and directly say it. Like, just give some parameters or give some kudos, and also label and enumerate the pitfalls of having a schedule like Indiana had. So if they did that, I think we'd be in a much better place. I understand this is the ratings bonanza that they were hoping for, and it's creating all this conversation in November around 15 to 16 teams, where it used to be really 3 or 4 teams could win the national title. That's still the case. There's only 3 or 4 teams, in my opinion, that can reel off 3 or 4 wins in this playoff, but it has expanded the conversation. Speaking of broader conversations, because I can already feel our editors chopping up this segment. So let's hop into the G5 heroes from
Wait, hold on. Before that, I have another take, and it's G5 related, so it ties back to us.
Okay, there you go.
I don't know if this is a hot take or not, but I think it's a hot take. And I think you'll disagree with me, which is why I wanted to bring it up here. I'm pretty confident Tulane is the best team in the group of 5. I think Tulane is a better overall team than Boise State is. I think, obviously, Boise is very dependent on Jeanty. He's the best player in the country. Their one weapon is a phenomenal weapon. Jeanty leads the country in rushing. Makai Hughes is 5th. The Tulane running game is awesome. It's not at that level, but it's pretty damn close. And I trust.
Why wasn't it awesome against K-State and Oklahoma?
I mean, it was early in the year. They had a whole new coaching staff.
Sure, yeah. So was the Oregon game. Boise showed up for that one. Listen, I'm okay with the conversation broadening to Tulane if Boise drops a game, but this idea that they just beat the doors off of Navy, Horvath is hurt, so it's like I'm not saying it's a totally useless data point.
I think the Tulane defense is very, very good, and I don't think Boise's defense is very good. And I still think Boise deserves to make the playoff because this isn't like a playoff conversation. It's more just like I think Tulane is a better team, and I will say playoff wise, I sat down last night and did a little math for you. So let's put on my nerd cap for a second and show off this Penn State education. I'll try to do this quickly. Here's my Tulane math at FanDuel, and tell me if you think I'm on the right page here. Boise is minus 300 to win the Mountain West. That is an implied probability of 75% chance of winning. They're also plus 240 to not make the playoff, which is 29.4%. So even right there, the math isn't really checking out. But if you say there's 75% chance that Boise wins the Mountain West, that means there's a 25% chance they don't make the Mountain West. Now, Tulane is minus 280 to win the American. That's a 73.7%. So if you do the 25% chance Boise does not make the Mountain West, which means they won't make the playoff, and the 73.7% chance Tulane wins the AAC, you get 18.4% that Boise loses, Tulane wins the American. If that's the case, I think Tulane's clearly the representative because they would have just beaten Army, and they already beat Louisiana, so that takes the Samba out of it. 18.4% chance that Boise loses, Tulane wins, translates to a fair value of plus 442. You can get Tulane plus 520 to make the playoff. Do you see any value in that number? Here's the thing that makes me a little nervous, and the numbers will change if this happens, is I think you're going to need UNLV to make the playoff, or to make the Mountain West title game. You're going to need UNLV to play Boise. Because I think Colorado State has no chance. Colorado State may lose this week, which would help, but that might change the numbers. So do you think there's any value in taking Tulane plus 520, seeing as they're the clear favorite to win the AAC? And that's a much better number than you're going to get UNLV on the money line, who I know you love. Are you kind of basic back in UNLV by taking that Tulane to make the playoff price? Or do you think that's a fair number given the fair value?
I'll answer it in 2 parts. First, I think your math is mathing properly. Yeah. I think you've gone ahead and identified value, and this is the time of year when sports books are super stingy in the futures market. I just tweeted out about this. They have Army to go undefeated in the regular season at 12-0 at plus 700. If you just do a rollover, they're at plus 550 to beat Notre Dame in this game on Saturday, let alone the other two games against Navy, which is after the AAC title game, but still counts for the regular season in this bet, and UTSA. You can get north of probably 15-1 if you just do a rollover and they win every single game.
Well, how about even just the fact that you have Boise minus 300 to win the Mountain West, but minus 330 to make the playoff? They can't make the playoff if they don't win the Mountain West.
Right. Yeah. So a lot of it doesn't make sense. I just think that the likelihood of Colorado State losing is not quite there, and I don't like Colorado State's chances against Boise. We can agree to disagree. I think Boise's defense, while flawed, does some things incredibly well. Namely, they create negative plays at such an insane rate, and they're able to get home on blitzes and getting healthy down the stretch. This is something I'll talk about in our picks for this week. That's going to play a big element of where they are defensively. All right, G5 Heroes, why don't you kick it off here after our long preamble about everything playoff?
Well, I'm going to make this long too. I'm taking Cole Best, RJ Perry, Derek Bowman, Andrew Guilfoyle, and Zane Herring. Do you know who those 5 guys are?
Offensive linemen?
The South Florida offensive linemen. South Florida, who has had a tough year. They were like the sneaky dark horse in the American. They've had injuries. They've underperformed. They ran for 425 yards and 6 touchdowns against Charlotte. They did kill our friend Biff, RIP. But it was a full team effort because South Florida had 9 different players rush for at least 10 yards. They averaged 8.6 yards per carry on a team. On 48 rushing attempts, Charlotte had just 1 tackle for loss. Of their 425 yards, 245 of them came before contact. These guys were just clearing holes that you and me could run through. So I wanted to give a shout out to the entire Bulls offensive line for just absolutely mauling Charlotte and dominating in a win. So give me the Bulls offensive line here.
Our little version of the G5 Joe Moore Award right there. I like that a lot. I'm actually jealous I didn't come up with that idea at any point this season. I'm going to go with Devin Dampier, our man from New Mexico. The Lobos get the huge upset over Wazoo. Not only is it one of their biggest wins in school history, it puts them on track to potentially get to a bowl game at 6-6. Dampier, 193 on the ground, 4 total touchdowns. He gets the game-winning rushing touchdown with 21 seconds left against the Cougs. As I mentioned, they get Hawaii next week. They can get to that 6th win. And if they do so, that's great for the minor bowl games. It's something near and dear to my heart. I love those midweek weird bowl games that arguably nobody watches, but it's really for us college football sickos. I need a really fun offense like New Mexico and what Bronco Mendenhall's been able to put together in year 1. Speaking of, this comment is directed at the 505 Sports Venture Foundation. For those not in the know, that's the NIL arm for New Mexico athletics. Find at least $1 million to keep Dampier around because he is going to be a hot name in the portal. I need exciting, high-scoring, late-night Mountain West Conference action for years to come with the Lobos. Get Brian Urlacher on the phone. Danny Granger, I think, made $70 million in the NBA. Get him to throw in $250K. Get this guy a bag and keep him. If Boise can keep Jeanty in the conference, New Mexico, you got to do your part. Please, please, please keep Dampier doing special things with his legs in the conference because just a lot of fun to watch. That game was wild, that comeback for the Lobos.
Yeah, it was awesome.
All right, let's hop into best bets. You told me confidently you're going to go first. You thought that there was a chance that I may be stealing your best bet. So lay it on me, week 13. What's the top of your card?
Yeah, I got to go. I'm going back to the darlings of the podcast, the most bet on team for us for this season. Not always successfully, but I'm riding them again. Arkansas State, -3 against UL Monroe. Look, I love Brian Vincent, and it's been a great story, the start they had, but this is still a bottom 25 team in the country. They got off to a really good start, starting 5-1, but they beat Jackson State. They beat UAB in the revenge spot of the season. They beat Troy in a gross 13-9 game. James Madison was a good win. I'll give them that. That was a good one. JMU outgained about 150 yards and missed a 2-point conversion that would have tied it. And then they beat Southern Miss, who is just an abomination. Since then, they have lost to South Alabama, Marshall, Texas State, and Auburn. They only even covered against Marshall. Their defense is getting absolutely torched. ULM ranks 124th in the country in success rate on defense. They have allowed an average of 40 points per game in their last 4 games. They've especially been torched on the ground, and that has been actually the biggest improvement for Arkansas State recently down the stretch. In their first 5 games this year, Arkansas State averaged 93.8 rushing yards per game in their first 5. They had 4 rushing touchdowns. Well, they have averaged 221.4 rushing yards over the last 5 games, and they have 10 rushing touchdowns in those games. Jaquez Cross has really gotten going. Zach Wallace operates as the goal line back, and then Rayner's really dangerous with his legs, and he's been using them more recently. And establishing the run has really helped Rayner just calm down. He hasn't thrown an interception in the last 4 wins, and that's always been the key to him. Protect the football, win the game. ULM has just 5 interceptions all season. They have 1 pick in their last 7 games. So if Rayner can keep the ball clean, Arkansas State should run all over this Warhawks defense. And, ULM's offense is 131st in the country. So as bad as, the Arkansas State defense has been, the ULM offense is absolutely horrendous. So I don't expect much from them. I'm just way higher on this Red Wolves team. But you better have my money. Give me your boys.
I'm going to bring this up early because it was going to be in the G5 High Five, but I have a play for this game as well. I like under 52.5. For starters, you talked about Monroe and how poor they play offensively. They protect themselves by playing so slow, almost 31 seconds between plays. That's 133rd in the entire country. And really the question is, can they slow the Arkansas State passing attack? Because I agree strides have been made on the ground by the Red Wolves, but when they carve teams up and when Rayner's really dealing, they can score a lot of points. But ULM, 46th in coverage per PFF, 35th in passing success rate defense. That to me at least says that they should be able to limit some of the aerial explosives. You can run on them all day long. You pointed out they're 126th in success rate against the run, but they're 12th in limiting rushing explosives. So as long as they're requiring Arkansas State to put together 6, 7, 8, 9 play drives, I think the clock is going to work in our favor here. And when you look at those long methodical drives from the Warhawks, Ahmad Hardy in Sun Belt Conference games, he's averaging 20 carries per contest, 129 yards from scrimmage when you add in his receiving yards as well. And Arkansas State's run defense, they can't stop anybody. 132nd there. So they're near the bottom in line yards, stuff rate, tackling. Turn this game into a running clock situation. 52.5 is a number that I have circled as one of my favorite on the board here. So I'm going to go under there. We'll tag that on and drop that into the G5 High Five. As for my best bet here in week 13, going to go with the team that is just hot as a pistol. I'm very happy to say that UTSA has turned their entire season around. They've been a darling of this podcast for years. Meep, everything going big in San Antonio, getting it back on the tracks after a really poor start to the season. They're hosting Temple. The Owls landed on the endangered species list this fall. Every FBS head coach of an Owl team has now been fired, including Temple's Stan Drayden, who finished 9-25 in North Philly. They fired him after an 18-15 overtime win over FAU. The rare but unfortunate situation, both head coaches getting fired after that game, even the head coach that won. Really, I mean, you don't have to go that deep into the box score. You can just pull up the schedule. When things have gone wrong for Temple this season, they've gone really wrong. They lost to Tulane by 46, 22 to ECU, 28 to Army, 27 to Navy, 48 to Oklahoma. UTSA, as I mentioned, meanwhile, they are going in the right direction. This offense is absolutely cooking with McCown. In his last 5 games, he's averaged 376 total yards of offense, and the offense as a whole has averaged over 40 points per game in that stretch, those 5 games. If you watch that North Texas game, they were the explosive offense, not the mean green. I was lucky to get the over as my best bet last week with a late, meaningless rushing touchdown, but they're hitting explosives on the ground. They are really efficient with McCown slinging the ball around. The play calling has just the right mix of run and pass, keeping defenses honest, and Temple is kind of in a tailspin. So really the question here is motivation on both sides, and does Temple have an answer in any way, shape, or form? Bowl eligibility is right on the table for the Roadrunners, so I don't foresee them overlooking Temple. They want to get this win. They certainly want to win convincingly in front of their home crowd. And when Temple is down, they're going to go to one guy, and that's Dante Wright. He's a baller. He's coming off a 14 reception, 147-yard game. But UTSA, as I mentioned, just grounded the UNT passing attack. They put Chandler Morris on his off foot the entire game. He was scrambling. He's trying to throw across his body. They were doing things in terms of the pre-snap look, mixing coverages, getting pressures from different angles. I think they're going to put whoever Temple ends up rolling out at quarterback. We could see 2 or 3 different quarterback options for the Owls in this game. I think Temple is going to have the same issues they've had basically for the whole season. They failed to score 3 touchdowns in 5 of their last 6 games. I don't think they get to 3 touchdowns here, which means can I get 40 out of UTSA? Absolutely. I'm going with the Roadrunners. Meet me.
Yeah, I like it. I almost went with our boy Robert Henry as the other G5 hero after his 83-yard touchdown run with 2 minutes left to hit that over. Yeah, my only fear, and one of the games you and me had discussed earlier was Bowling Green, Ball State. That's on my cutting room floor. I feel like the fired coach bump, interim coach has cashed every single. I think everyone has cashed this so far this year. I would say I'm less worried about Temple getting a bump. But that was why I didn't put Bowling Green in mine, is I do think Bowling Green on paper is the much better team and should win by 2 touchdowns against Ball State. But I just worry about that one made me a little more worried about that's at home, that, you get the interim coach bump from that one. So I don't hate it as much for yours. UTSA they're rolling right now. They should step on the throat.
All right, let's go into the G5 high five. I mentioned my Arkansas State Monroe under. So that's one of my 2 additions here in week 13. You're doing the heavy lifting. You got 3. Let's do 2 in a row for you, and then I'll get back to my second edition.
All right, I'll start with the one that I would say I'm the least confident in, just because as I was writing it, I started talking myself out of it. But so just disclosure wise, not my favorite play, but I'm sticking with it. Give me Louisiana minus 10.5 against Troy. Louisiana lost a bad game for them to lose last week against South Alabama. And on top of that, they lost quarterback Ben Wooldridge for the rest of the season with a broken collarbone. But I don't think there's that much of a drop-off to Chandler Fields. Wooldridge's been playing well, but Fields is a guy who's been at Louisiana for 6 years. He started 12 games. He was in a QB competition in the summer, but he was hurt. So Wooldridge kind of won the job by default.
Well, if I could jump in real quick, just a quick question for you. If Woolridge was playing 100% healthy, where would you put this number at where it would then be a stay away for you? How much, and basically that's a different way of saying how much point value do you think this quarterback swap has?
2 or 3. I mean, I wouldn't play it over 14 with Wooldridge. I'd probably play it up to 12.5 with him, 13 maybe. Fields has thrown 20 touchdowns, 7 picks in his career. He's completing 63% of his passes. And what was weird about the South Alabama game, by the way, there's no team in the entire country I feel like I have less of a feel on than South Alabama. Like sometimes they look so good. Sometimes they look horrible. I have no idea, but I only have bet any game involving them once. But they were winning 24-3 when Wooldridge got hurt. So Fields came in, led them on 4 drives. They scored on all 4 drives. He ran for a touchdown with 1:16 left, but then they missed a 2-point conversion that would have tied the game. But Louisiana outscored them 22-0 with Fields in the game. So I do expect Fields to be just fine. I expect them to lean on the run game with Bill Davis, Traylon Washington, Zylan Perry. All 3 have averaged at least 5.5 yards per carry. And Troy's been terrible on defense this season, especially against the run. They're 97th in success rate. They've allowed 20 rushing touchdowns in 10 games. Troy's defense has not been able to force turnovers at all this season. They have just 7 turnovers all year, the fewest in the Sun Belt. And, the Louisiana defense stinks too, but I'm just not sold on Troy's offense. They looked fine last week, but they can't run the ball. Matthew Caldwell is just super inconsistent. He's got 8 turnovers, 6 interceptions on the year. He looked good against Georgia Southern, but I kind of want to see him do it again. And Louisiana has allowed just 1 passing touchdown in the last 3 games against Texas State, Arkansas State, and South Alabama. All passing attacks I trust much more than Troy. And because they lost that game, Louisiana is in absolute must-win mode after last week. They are 5-1 in Sun Belt play, but Arkansas State, Texas State, and South Alabama only have 2 conference losses. South Alabama now has the tiebreaker. So they still control their own destiny, but one more slip-up will cost them the Sun Belt championship. So I think the Raging Cajuns bounce back here. I think they rally around Fields. This guy's been in their program for 6 years, so I think they're going to be fine with him, and I think they bounce back here and rally, and I like them at 10.5 against Troy.
All right, what else you got here in week 13?
Let's go with a fun one here. Give me over 44.5 for Army versus Notre Dame. For starters, this Notre Dame offense is in absolute killer mode right now. They have scored at least 30 points in 6 straight games. Riley Leonard is playing terrific football. He's throwing the ball well. And him and Jeremiah Love are just running it down teams' throats. We saw them put up 51 points and average 7.2 yards per play against Navy a few weeks ago. Now, Army's defense has been very good at keeping teams out of the end zone, but they only rank 86th in the country in success rate on defense. They are 97th at defending the run. I expect Notre Dame to have success on the ground here. And we've seen bad teams move the ball on Army, and I just don't expect the same level of red zone success against the step up in competition in Notre Dame. So I'm fully expecting Notre Dame to score at least 35 here. They also still need style points. They don't have the conference championship to play in, and they need to run up the score to secure a home playoff game. So that means I need 10 from Army? So, for starters, Navy scored 14 despite 6 turnovers and a hurt quarterback. So Notre Dame's pass defense is elite, but they're just 84th in the country in rushing success allowed. Army's second in the country in rush success. If you need points, nobody scores more than Bryson Daly. He has 21 rushing touchdowns on the season, 7 passing TDs. He averages 132 yards per game on the ground. Kanye Udo's averaging 95 himself. Both of them average more than 6 yards per carry. And like I said, despite all the turnovers, and Navy looked horrific, they still ran for 222 yards against this Notre Dame defense. So I thought Army was better than Navy all year. So I still think Army will be able to move the ball. I think they can score here. I think Notre Dame will continue to run it up because they've run it up on everyone and they have to keep doing it. So I really like this over 44.5. This is the other one I really, really like in addition to Arkansas State.
I'm going to talk more about this game in a minute, but I'm going to put a cap on our G5 high five. I'm going to take Boise, going to Laradice, playing a Wyoming team that is coming off a really disappointing performance last week against Colorado State. The Broncos laying 23 here. It's going to be windy. It's going to be cold. It's going to be clear. So you don't have to worry about any slippery conditions in Laradice. But what you do have to worry about is Ashton Jeanty. It's Ashton Jeanty time in a big way. It's time to impress not only the Heisman voters, but the College Football Playoff Committee for a potential first-round bye, holding on to that as they are currently that number 4 team. And Wyoming has already given up over 200 yards per game on the grounds, and they give them up in huge chunk plays, 131st in rush EPA. They've given up 13 carries of 30-plus yards this year, which is in the absolute basement of FBS. That's Jeanty's calling card, popping a big one, changing the game, flipping field position, everything that he's been able to do for the Broncos this year. And Wyoming, just in general, they don't create any havoc on defense. They never get players or never get opposing teams behind the sticks. And even, in terms of having an opportunity to backdoor this, offensively, their receivers had the worst PFF receiving grade in the Mountain West Conference. They're 127th in the country in receiving grade, and they've struggled big time with drops. You saw that it just killed them against Colorado State. They had an opportunity to hang around in that game if they can just squeeze the football a couple times in key spots. Up against this Boise defense, blitz, Boise, blitz. They're going to put people on islands, and Wyoming is not the kind of passing offense to make you pay in that regard. So I think they're going to get home. They're going to create at least 10 tackles for loss in this game. It could get really ugly. And also keep in mind, drops, generally go up when you have windy conditions. You're going to have gusts close to 20 miles per hour in this spot. So I think there's an opportunity for the Boise team that is so much better on the ground to dominate this game and win going away. Also, this play shifts into a top play kind of category for me if Alexander Tubner, the team captain, the green dot communicator on defense, if he's back. There's not a lot of information. We have to live with this all the time in G5 land. He was on crutches on November 9th. He missed the last game against San Jose State. If he's back, Wyoming's really going to struggle in lots of ways offensively in this game. So even with him sidelined under that key number of 24, I like it with the Boise Blue laying 23. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think this is one of those cases where, normally you hear teams talking about the bulletin board material using it as motivation. Kirby somehow convinces Georgia that they suck every week. I think this is one of those cases where it almost the opposite works in Boise's favor, with them being, appearing on that force slot in the bracket. Because if it was like, hey, we're 12, we take care of business, we just have to win, and we're in, whatever, just there's no incentive to run it up. But now you kind of get that oh, we could get a bye here. And that's now you have the we can't let teams catch us. We can't let that Big 12 team catch us in your head, which I don't think they necessarily had a few weeks ago. So now they're a little bit more incentivized to run it up than I think they might have thought they were. Yeah, I like it as well. For my last play of the high 5, give me Old Dominion. -2 at home against Marshall. Look, we know Marshall. First of all, I don't think we've talked enough about Marshall. They had a great year. I do want to give them credit for exceeding expectations, being a lot better than I think everyone thought. I mean, they were right in the thick of the Sun Belt Championship race. So I do want to give them a little credit, but we know they want to run the ball. Charles Huff, longtime running backs coach, and that has always been this team's strength. Rasheen Ali, Lamborghini Laybourne, now AJ Turner. However, Turner didn't play last week, and he was in a walking boot on the sideline. He's averaging over 9 yards per carry. That is a massive loss if he doesn't play. Same thing with you. Lord only knows if he'll play. There's like one Twitter account I could find that was even tweeting that he didn't play last week, and there's nothing on, will he play? But to go from a boot to playing seems unlikely. Justin Houston has started the last 2 games. He's averaging just 4.6 yards per carry. He doesn't have a touchdown all season. Now, they also switched quarterbacks halfway through the year to Braylon Braxton, who does give them a big threat with his legs. He's averaging nearly 50 yards per game rushing. However, Braxton, he doesn't scare me as a passer. We've seen him for a few years now. He was at Tulsa before. We kind of know what Braxton is. He's completing just 56% of his passes in his career. This season, he has 5 big-time throws and 6 turnover-worthy plays, and their best receivers out for the year. So I'm just not afraid of this passing attack. And all of this just sets up well for an Old Dominion defense that is fantastic against the run. The Monarchs are 14th in the country in rushing success rate. They've allowed just 4.1 yards per carry. Old Dominion's offense has been much better since switching to Colton Joseph at quarterback. He has 10 touchdowns through the air, and he's added 9 rushing touchdowns. He is very mobile. He's basically Braxton, but better. He averages 61 rushing yards per game, 5.5 per carry. He's paired in the backfield with Aaron Young to form a top 25 rushing success rate team. And I think that is going to be the difference in this game. When I look at these 2 teams, they're very similar. They play a similar style. They want to rely on their run game, play defense, dual threat quarterback, RPO stuff. And the difference is Marshall is 47th in rushing success rate. Old Dominion's 24th. Old Dominion is 14th in rushing success allowed on defense. Marshall's 78th. So Marshall's been great against the pass, but like I said, that's not really what Old Dominion wants to do anymore. And again, Marshall has had a great year, but they beat App State, Georgia State, ULM, Southern Miss, and Coastal. I'm just not impressed with that slate. The Old Dominion has beaten Bowling Green, Texas State, and Georgia Southern, which all 3 of those are more impressive than anything that Marshall has. So I like the Monarchs here, and I'm just happy that I finally can back Uncle Ricky Ronnie and not be accused of Penn State bias, because Charles Huff is a Penn State guy too. So it cancels out there. So I can finally bet the Monarchs and not be called a homer, because I'm going against my boy Charles Huff as well. So give me Uncle Ricky in the Monarchs. What do you think of that play?
You have like bet regret, and you have the
You hate
game.
Marshall too, so I thought you'd be on my side.
Well, this is more about Old Dominion, and I was thinking about this because South Carolina has been getting a lot of love in the analytics community, saying that if you want to talk about SEC teams that deserve an at-large bid and you forget about the wins and losses, just look at the high-end play, South Carolina's there. How did South Carolina not cover against Old Dominion? They weren't even close.
They should have lost.
They should have lost the game. Yeah, so that's how
Old Dominion dominated that game.
Yes. So that one's still frustrating to me, where I was like, I think there's something special with the South Carolina team. They almost lose to Old Dominion at home, and now they're surging in November. So I was just a little bit early on them. That's all I wanted to say about
Ricky
that game.
Ronnie at large bid. Lock it up.
All right, we're
quality
going.
Loss. Hey, quality SEC loss for the Monarchs, baby. Put them in.
We are going to the G5 Moneyline Underdog Parlay here in Week 13. I'm going to get a kick started with a swing for the fences. The pun being they're playing in Yankee Stadium. Army playing Notre Dame. Little history lesson here. Notre Dame selected Yankee Stadium as a tribute to the 100th anniversary of the Four Horsemen game, when Notre Dame upset Army 14-7 at the Polo Grounds in 1924. Polo Grounds no longer open, so they got to go to Yankee Stadium. These teams haven't met up since 2016, when Notre Dame whipped Army 44-6 in San Antonio. Army hasn't beaten Notre Dame in 66 years. and they only stayed within one score twice since 1958, a 1-point loss at the Meadowlands in 95 and a 3-point road loss in South Bend in 1998. Now, the immediate pushback on an Army upset here is simple. Notre Dame's rolling. They've won 8 in a row. The last 5 in a row that they've won by 33 points per game. They also decimated Navy at MetLife Stadium, 51-14. So that means Army doesn't stand a chance, right? Well, Navy had 6 turnovers in that game. How bad was that? 5 lost fumbles in that game. That was nearly half of Navy's giveaways for the entire season in one game. So yes, it's impressive. You still get credit defensively, but there was just a couple spots where they were just putting the ball on the carpet, unforced errors, and it became a runaway for Notre Dame. The snowball situation got away for them. Army, to put it lightly, they're really buttoned up in this regard. 3 giveaways the entire season. Bryson Daly, 100% healthy again. How do I know it? He ran it 36 times against North Texas, 153 yards, 2 touchdowns against the Mean Green in a 14-3 win. They absolutely shut down the UNT offense. I will say Chandler Morris is clearly playing through an injury. Anyone who's watched as much UNT football as I have this year, they won't put his name on the injury list. He had an in-game shoulder injury about 4 games ago. He's not been the same guy. They've not been the same explosive offense without him being able to throw the ball. But still, to hold UNT with what they did on the ground against UTSA last Friday night to just 3 points, I'm impressed with that Army performance. I mentioned the 4 horsemen at the top. How about the holy trinity of rushing the football? Army, first in rushing success, first in line yards, first in offensive stuff rate. They never get behind the sticks. They're first in havoc avoidance in the entire country. And they're up against a Notre Dame front that could be depleted. Injury news here, Howard Cross remains questionable for Notre Dame in the trenches. He has a sprained ankle against Florida State. Didn't play against Virginia last week. The Wahoos threw that game away. Calandria threw 3 picks, but they did run for 128 yards without Cross dominating the line of scrimmage. So I think there's an opportunity for Army to have similar success, similar to what they've done for most of this season, running against the Notre Dame front. And if you can stop the Notre Dame running game, you can hang with them. That's just a fact. No one's been able to do that for about 2 months, but NIU held them to 123 yards, and they got Notre Dame into third down passing situations. That translated to a 30% conversion rate and 2 picks for Riley Leonard when the defense knew he had to put the ball in orbit. As good as he's been, it's predicated on the run threat every time that he drops back in the pocket. You have far less flexibility in terms of your coverages when you have to put a spy or multiple spies on Leonard because he's so physical. He's usually running over the first defensive back. So you need to gang tackle, get people to him. That takes out some of the sophistication with your defense. Now, Army can absolutely be run on, but the one thing is they don't give up big rushing plays. They're top 10 in limiting explosives overall and top 10 in limiting rushing explosives. I think that's key because this game really just swings on third downs. Get to third downs, try to win those situations because if you hold Notre Dame there, and by the way, Notre Dame 86th in third down conversion offense this year, every stop is an opportunity for Army to shrink this game down in a huge way. Finally, narrative-wise, elimination game for the college football playoff for Notre Dame, as we mentioned, a huge legacy game for Marcus Freeman. If he were to lose this, another opportunity to make the playoff, this time an expanded field. You already had your mulligan against NIU. It gets really sweaty for him in the fourth quarter if he's potentially blowing another game to a G5 team. You had NIU, you had Marshall last year. It's becoming a theme. This is one of the most high-profile jobs in all of sports. A lot of pressure on his shoulders. And then finally, Army also had an extra week to prepare for this game. I think you're going to see new wrinkles from Cody Worley, their offensive coordinator. He's done a phenomenal job for the past year and a half, getting them one step ahead of the defense. They've run fake field goals. They've run trick plays. Noah Short, their speedster at wide receiver. Sometimes they use him in the run game as well. I could see him being used for a trick play. I'm swinging for the fence this year. Give me Army. Give me Munkin. I want to see them win. Let's see if I can call this here. 17-16, Army wins it with a walk-off field goal.
You couldn't have made it a little higher than that. By the way,
37-36. There we go. How about that?
Add a point. Let's go rewind and add a point to my argument, by the way. Yankee Stadium, short porch, good for the over. So I was going to ask you that. How do you see this game playing out? Or do you think if my over hits, are you less or more confident? Are you picturing my over hits because Army's going blow for blow with Notre Dame and Daly's running it down their throat? Or are you more thinking Army slows it down, limits possessions, wins 17-14?
Yeah, I don't see a path forward for Army to win in a high-scoring game. Doesn't mean it can't happen because this is football. It's an oblong shaped ball. You get some weird bounces. You get special teams, defensive score. You get Notre Dame, taking some chances on fourth downs, field position going in your favor. Still, this is an offense that is built to go 4.5 yards at a time. So I think even if they have an opportunity to pour on some points, they still want to be running that clock. So that's not to say that they can't score. They have had some big scoring games this year. They've shown to be much more explosive than they have been in years past. And Worley has done a really good job creating opportunities for Short to pop some big plays. But I mean, basically, I think if this gets into the 30s, Army's going to be in deep water. So I don't see them keeping up. But in terms of your over, if it goes the opposite direction, we already saw this movie. If you turn the ball over and you have to throw it as a triple option team, Notre Dame can get on you and they're not going to let you up and they could score 50 points on their own. So I
take
still
the
like
Army,
Army,
take Army in the over, you'll hit one of them. I'm glad you mentioned the Chandler Morris stuff because I'm going with East Carolina plus 120 against North Texas. For me, this is very simple. North Texas games are crazy. They're insane. And there's a ton of variance in them because they're insane. This team is going to give East Carolina a chance to score on every possession. It's just a matter of if their offense can keep up with how bad their defense is. They've allowed 35.7 points per game, 124th in the country. They have lost 4 games in a row, and they've allowed over 45 points in 3 of the 4. You mentioned Morris looks hurt. That's been a huge issue for them. And now I will say the losses are to Memphis, Tulane, and Army. So they're understandable. They're the 3 worst, 3 best teams in the conference. But they were short favorites against UTSA, and they got smacked in that game. And you mentioned at the top, UTSA dominated them. And now they face an East Carolina team that beat UTSA by 10, and that was with Jake Garcia at quarterback. Since the Pirates have made the move to Katin Hauser, they are 3-1. Hauser has 14 touchdown passes in his last 4 games. He is playing really, really well. He is certainly not afraid to sling the ball and take some chances. Their top receiver, Chase Sowell, he's kind of been dealing with injuries all season. He's playing, but is he healthy? Is he 100%? But Anthony Smith and Winston Wright have both really came on. They've both been terrific with Hauser under center. Smith is averaging 30.5 yards per catch over the last 3 weeks. If you can bet his receiving over, we never know what props are going to be listed for these G5 games. Take his over because he will definitely catch a long touchdown in this game against this defense. And another big thing is ECU has also finally gotten their run game going recently. And you mentioned that's kind of been an issue for the North Texas defense. They have over 220 rushing yards in each of the last 3 games. Rajah Harris finally looks like his old self. And again, to play devil's advocate, ECU's looked great in their last 3 games against Temple, FAU, and Tulsa. But that's why they're the underdog here because, they come into this game with a ton of confidence because they've beaten up on bad teams. And now they face a bad defense that they should continue to play well against. So if the Pirates can get a few stops, force a couple turnovers, they absolutely can win this game. So give me ECU plus 120 in a game that just should feature a lot of variance because it's going to be crazy.
I applaud you we just talked about this. Teams can change. South Carolina opening game of the season to where they are now. Same thing on ECU. I think you've come a long way on what you think about ECU and their quarterback room. Because the fact of the matter is they have been more explosive. And some of it is players getting experience to help out a quarterback at the skill position. Some of it is play calling. Some of it is opponent adjusted. There's all kinds of different ways to look at it. But how they're playing right now, they're ascending. And North Texas is... they're getting close to being in a situation where they need to lean on the running game. You saw some of the big runs that they were popping with their white running back, who apparently has over 1 million followers on Instagram. I don't know how that works, but they brought that up multiple times on the telecast. I'm impressed with that. But he was also hitting some huge runs. And I think they end up, probably trying to run the ball with him 15, 20 times in this game to protect Morris. They probably should be going with someone other than Morris if he's as injured as he appears. But that's neither here nor there. I like the ECU play. Any final thoughts on your cutting room floor? I know you mentioned a few along the way.
Well, first, the thing with the change in my tune on ECU is Hauser is just he has no fear. He just slings the ball downfield. And my issue with him was just he turns the ball over a ton. You saw it at Michigan State. But it helps they've been playing bad defenses that he just hasn't been those air it out, passive, and going for touchdowns. Well, he's playing a bad defense. Like, would I be playing him against Army or Navy or one of these top teams in the Tulane? God, no. But I don't trust North Texas to turn him over and force him into those mistakes that he takes chances. I expect when he takes a chance, North Texas's defenders are going to collide and they're going to score a touchdown. But you want to talk about me turning a leaf and changing my tune. Oh, I had Coastal Carolina on my cutting room floor. I almost took that -2 against Georgia Southern. I don't think Georgia Southern is very good. We saw that last week with them losing. And Coastal's another team that they just kind of have high variance. They've been running the ball more. They finally realized that, we should just give the ball to Braden Bennett because he's our best player. And if they do that against Georgia Southern, they should be able to run on them. And Coastal's pass defense isn't bad. So I almost took Coastal. That would have been a full face turn for me. But left him on the cutting room floor along with Bowling Green just because the interim bump scared me away a little bit.
For Mike Iannello, I'm Mike Calabrese. This has been the Group of Five Deep Dive under the BBOC banner. We have more coming your way on the podcast feed. That's Colin and Stuck on Thursday, dropping off their Week 13 full card from the trash all the way up to the marquee matchups. And then on Saturday, Brett McMurphy joins Colin, Stuck, and myself, as well as Johnny Football, for a live show from 10:30 to about 11:15 a.m. Eastern. You can see it over at the BBOC YouTube channel. Get into that comment section. Drop us some likes, subscribe. Please comment as well. And next week, I'm going to give out multiple parlays, as a matter of fact, in terms of our 5-star reviews. They're starting to roll in here. Please say something nice or don't say anything at all. You can comment whatever you want as long as it's 5-star in there, helping us move a step closer to 1,000 reviews over there on Apple Podcasts. Thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you enjoy the Saturday slate and we get one step closer to a college football playoff that's going to include a G5 champion and maybe one that has a bye right into the quarterfinals. Thanks for listening, guys. Have a good one.